Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features Uncanny X-Men number 181, cover dated May 1984. So the cover by John Romita Jr., inking himself too. An unusual one, very designy, with the X-Men hanging out and around their cover logo and Professor X in the corner box leaning against it. Pretty unusual. We've got the cover caption, "Young Dragons in Love," and the dragons in question are Lockheed here in the foreground, and then this huge female dragon that has followed the X-Men back from the Beyonders battle world to Earth. So at the end of the previous issue, 180, they made their way to Central Park and were zapped to Battle World for the Secret Wars miniseries, and now they're back in this issue. And this dragon that Lockheed had something of a romantic relationship with, let's put it like that, in Secret Wars, follows them back to Earth. Let me know what you think of this cover. As I said, it's an unusual one. There's nothing else like it in the array of X-Men covers, I would say. So let's open this up to the splash page, and it begins with a bunch of Japanese children looking up in the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? Well, what is it? Let's turn to our double page half spread. It is a huge dragon, the one from the cover. And the title of the story is Tokyo Story. Creative team, Chris Claremont writer, John Romita Jr. and Dan Green credited as artists. What that means is that John Romita Jr. is providing breakdowns and Dan Green finishes of the breakdowns. Tom Orzechowski, letterer, Glenn Swine, colorist. So the kids here who also show up in Uncanny X-Men 222, the Mark Silvestri illustrated issue, they're here checking through these pretty cool monster guidebooks that they have, and they're looking to see, is it Gojira, is it Space Cruiser Yamata, Astro Boy, Red Ronin, is it Hulk here? We see the silhouette of Hulk. No, their monster is not in the book, so it's a new one. And then right out of the belly of the monster pop these mysterious figures, and we'll see who those are very shortly. But I just wanted to observe something about Romita Jr.'s design of the dragon. I think it's pretty cool. And also it reminds me in some respects of the design he would later work up for Mephisto in his Daredevil run with Ann Nocenti. So let's continue with the story. So those figures popping out from the belly of the beast turn out to be the X-Men minus Cyclops, who also was zapped to Battle World. And the children recognize the X-Men from their book, and they go over to aid them, and then they are blown away by the flapping wings of the dragon as the dragon flies off. So the X-Men come to, and the children help them with some tea here for Professor X. Very polite children there. And then the X-Men start to get their bearings in terms of where they are. So Wolverine is super sharp that they are in Japan, and the children explain, well, it's Kanagawa Prefecture on the main island of Honshu. So Wolverine Riley comments here, "Can't seem to stay out of this flaming country even when I want to." And that's of course in relation to his failed marriage with Mariko Yashida. And of course, if he's in Japan, she's going to make an appearance in this issue, and indeed she does. So Storm here catches the reader up on what happened between the past issue and this particular one. And also she wants to know where's Cyclops, how come he's no longer with them. And there's a note here by Louise Simonson, editor, that to learn where our heroes have been and what happened to them, read The Secret Wars, on sale now. So the children are fascinated by the little dragon. And Professor X here says the creature that became involved with Lockheed while we were off Earth, but they were the same size. So they were the same size on Battle World, but for some reason the dragon is huge here on Earth. And Professor X uses his telepathy to scan the children's minds and find out what the date is. And he can see that he can see in their minds today's date and the fact that the X-Men have been gone for over a week. And he's worried about Kitty Pryde because they had a plan with Kitty when she went to the Massachusetts Academy with Douglas Ramsey, that they would stay in telepathic contact in case she had any trouble. and she did have trouble with the White Queen, and that's ongoing in issues of New Mutants at this time. And but what's interesting to note is that from Japan, he can't make telepathic contact with Kitty in North America, in Massachusetts. So that's interesting. So he decides that the best thing to do here is that Rogue, who would be able to reach home far faster than any of us, say perhaps Storm, that she should go and check up on Kitty and Cyclops, because Rogue would have sufficient power should Kitty need any aid. And here's an interesting little character bit. Rogue turns to Storm, who is official team leader, and she addresses Storm and says, "Storm, you're the boss. You want I should go?" And Storm says, "Much as I would love to, Rogue, my place is with the team. The dragon is here because of us. We are responsible for it. We've no choice but to ensure it does no harm." So Professor X then chimes in and says, "Make certain Cyclops and the New Mutants are all right as well." And Rogue, as she flies off, says she'll do her best. Now, Professor X realizes that maybe he's committed a bit of a faux pas, and he says, "I shouldn't have spoken as I did. The others are confused and angry. They don't know who's in charge. But what am I to do? After years of being forced to sit on the sidelines, I'm at least able to truly be a part of the team. I can't help leading in the field, as I do in the classroom. The role comes naturally to me. I'm not sure I should give it up, or even if I want to." But he just thinks that. He doesn't talk it out. And then we get Wolverine's perspective, which is very interesting. So Wolverine thinks, but without speaking it out aloud, he says, "I hope Charlie knows what he's doing. Conflict of command is never good. I had my fill of it when Roro first took over and Psyche kept hoarding in, meaning well and doing well, but always undercutting Storm's authority and confidence." And he continues to think, "That was when she started getting tough inside. I wonder if she was overcompensating, trying to be better in Psyche at the job he did better than anyone. Storm tore out her soul to do this job, Charlie, and you're pulling rank as much as tells her it was for nothing, that you think she can't cut it. That's wrong, bub, and so are you." But notice, none of this is spoken aloud, so this isn't this kind of bickering that you would get in a superhero team back in the 60s in Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's day, where these kinds of arguments over leadership would be spoken aloud among teammates. Here, more sophisticated, we get the characters' thoughts, we know that they have a double perspective on what's going on, and that they're biting their tongue as well. So I like that level of sophistication of characterization. So then the scene switches to the war room of the National Command Center, Japanese Combined Self-Defense Forces. There's an alarm going, and we have a report of a giant dragon heading for Tokyo. So one of the people here in the war room makes the point, it can't be. This is off season for giant monsters attacking Tokyo and Japan. So these battle tanks and jet fighters go into attack mode, and this guy sees that there's another sighting, which is the American superhero group, the X-Men. They're pursuing the dragon, and who happens to be there in the war room also, except for Lady Mariko. And she's there and thinks to herself, the X-Men, Wolverine should be with them. And she's there with this guy, Shiro. Perhaps you may also be of use. So who does he turn out to be? She tells him to not question her will, but merely obey. I like the use of the screen tone here, rendering the shade of the brim of Mariko's hat over her face. It's nicely done. And we'll see who Shiro turns out to be very shortly. I like this page 2, just 4 panels here. That's the story breed. We get a good look at the dragon atop this skyscraper, ripping off bits with her talons, and the debris raining down on the street below. And here we have the X-Men flying in to aid the citizens of Tokyo. And I like this rendering here of them flying in the kind of, shall we say, jet stream of Ororo's command of the wind. And it reminds me of one of Silvestri's covers of X-Men from the Fall of the Mutants period as well. So I wonder, did you get an idea for that cover from this image by Romita Jr. and Dan Green? So Colossus lands on the street and uses his strength here to bat away some of the falling debris. Storm uses her weather powers to also shunt away some of this falling debris. But there's girders and masonry falling everywhere. Nightcrawler is doing his best to teleport people away. And Professor X uses his telepathy to guide Wolverine to some victims under the fallen rubble. And he gets a contact from Storm. And she asks him, can you forge a psi-link with the dragon? It knows you, trusts you as much as any of us. Perhaps you can calm her, because of course they had a relationship, so to speak, on Battleworld. So he says he'll try. And here we see Ororo acting as leader and thinking strategically, thinking more strategically than Professor X himself. And that's kind of implicitly making the case that Storm really is the best choice for leader, and the Professor ought to step back and let her do her thing. So he tries to make contact, but his mind probe is misunderstood as an attack, and so the dragon topples the building down on Professor X. But who arrives except for Shiro? It's Sunfire, and he uses his powers to blast away the top of the skyscraper, but all the rubble and girders and masonry falls down dangerously on top of Professor X and others. Professor X thinks there's more than enough of the wreckage to finish him off. And then we get this great shot here of the jet fighters going up against the dragon, but their attacks have no effect on the dragon. The dragon is pretty much invulnerable. That's a great shot of Tokyo here by John Romita Jr. with the battle tanks firing at the dragon as well. That's very cool. Really, really good stuff. And Wolverine says of the Japanese fighters, those guys know their business. But then from what Mariko told me and what I saw myself when I worked over here, they've had a lot of practice. So another reference to, in the Marvel Universe, how Japan is a target for those giant monsters. And indeed, there was a Godzilla comic published by Marvel Comics that was in Marvel Universe continuity too. So that's partly also what Wolverine is making reference to. And then we've got this interlude. So where is Cyclops? He was on Battleworld with the X-Men. So here he is. He pops out in his honeymoon gear, his shorts and cut-off vest. And Madeline is delighted to see him first of all, and then she's angry. You disappeared right out of my arms, she says to him. It wasn't my idea, I was kidnapped, he protests. He says, that's supposed to make me feel better? You've been gone for over a week. Do you have any idea what that was like, not knowing if you were alive or dead, not able to help? So Cyclops basically says, Madeline, I'd give anything to live a normal, ordinary life with you, but I don't think we'll ever be that lucky. I'm sorry, those are the magic words. And she says to him, I guess this is what they meant by better for worse. Could be. I love you. And likewise. So they're reconciled and they can get on with their honeymoon. But then we switch back to Tokyo. Great vertical panel layout here by Romita Jr. with the dragon just ripping shreds out of these skyscrapers. We see the wreckage here, and using her wings, flapping her wings, blowing away the battle tanks, and breaking trees, uprooting trees, sending park benches flying, and waste paper bins. And Storm here really focusing now, thinking to herself, I've got to contain the dragon's wind or she will level the city. But its power, fighting a hurricane would be less effort. So this is really putting a strain on Storm. I even like the detail of her mohawk here flattened by the hurricane winds unleashed by the flapping of the dragon's wings. It's great attention to detail by Romita Jr. So she's worn out by her efforts to counteract the dragon's wings. Professor X here, meanwhile, wakes up to discover himself covered in rubble and that he can't move his feet, his legs. He can't feel anything, so he panics. And he thinks, just as he's begun to walk again, he's terrified that has been taken away from him. So he lets rip with a telepathic scream, which Wolverine tells him to cut out, turn down the volume before you fry our brains. And Colossus goes in to pull Professor X out of the rubble. I like the shot from behind of Colossus running. Romita Jr. always excellent at those kinds of shots of characters running. This is difficult to do and he does it really well. So Colossus removes the rubble from over Professor X, and Professor X gets back to guiding Wolverine with his telepathy to victims beneath the rubble. And this is an interesting bit here. This is a great panel here. Wolverine mostly in silhouette, and he thinks to himself that he smells blood. So he finds these two, and the mother here is very, very badly injured. He thinks to himself, the mother of the child must have shielded her body with her own when the roof collapsed. And the mother is dying. She says, Am I dying? She asks. And Wolverine confirms, hi, yes, I'm afraid I'm with you, my daughter Emiko, who will care for her? And Wolverine says here, quick as a flash, he doesn't even deliberate on it. He says, I'll keep her safe. I'll see she's raised as if she were my own. You have my word. So she thanks him in Japanese and dies. And this is Emiko. So Emiko will be Wolverine's ward for many years during Claremont's run, but he won't really do too much with it. Presumably, had he stayed on the title for as long as he expected to, he might have done something with her down the road in the future. I love this panel here. I love the silhouette of Wolverine and his mask on the back wall there. Really nice work by the artists. Another great page of the dragon here, about to chomp down, perhaps Storm, catching her with her tongue, but Sunfire intervenes and grabs Storm. And the creature is impervious to Sunfire's strongest bolts, and then he's caught by the massive wing and knocked to the ground. So they hit the ground. That looks bad. And the children arrive. And look at this huge shadow cast by the dragon on the ground. And great use of screen tone here. And the dragon's getting ready, maybe, to kill them all, when Lockheed finally shows up and intervenes and gets right in the dragon's eye. And then we have the narrative captions here to explain what's going on. The dragon speaks in roars that shake the countryside, while Lockheed's voice can barely be heard. Still, he manages to make his point, breathing fire right on her snout. She reels away, more in shock than actual pain. She can't believe this is happening. How could Lockheed treat her so when she had given him her hearts? So more than one. She never realized that was a gift he neither asked for nor desired. So interesting that these creatures with no language communicating, and Claremont's way of communicating that to the reader via his narrative captions. And then just the great storytelling here by Romita Jr. and the finishes by Dan Green, of course, as well. So then back in the war room at the controls, there are two contacts, the tiny blips pursuing the dragon. They're heading north across the Sea of Japan towards Soviet airspace. And then a massive energy discharge and the huge dragon's gone. They're both gone. So they disappear out in the middle of the sea. And then we switch back to Tokyo and the aftermath of all the damage wreaked by the female dragon. Nicely rendered, lots of detail here. There's a camera crew and everything with a reporter by John Romita Jr. and Dan Green. And so the reporter says that miraculously, though the destruction of property, severe casualties and loss of life were kept to a minimum, but that young mother died, and now Wolverine has responsibility for Emiko. So he says, we'll have to trace the kid's family, and Nightcrawler asks him, and if she has none, I gave my word, Elf. And we know that Wolverine is very much a man of honor, a man of his word. So Mariko happens to see the X-Men via the reporters, the TV crew's camera, and she thinks Wolverine is unhurt. Also the X-Men and cousin Shiro are well also, praise the gods. I do not believe my eyes. Professor Xavier is walking. I thought he was crippled for life. This is a miracle. And then she says, I wish I could be by my love's side. Seeing Logan only reminds me of how much I miss him. Does he feel the same? I wish you well, dear. one, she thinks, though we may never meet again, nor gain the happiness we deserve. The path of duty is as hard for me and fraught with peril as it is for you. I pray I can walk it with your courage and honor, because that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to regain the honor of her clan Yashida. So the day ends, and Lockheed doesn't look any worse for wear. He turns up again, and Professor X is like, what's the suggestion here? They're wondering, like, what went on, and the Professor X says, sensing his thoughts is one thing, Colossus, comprehending them is another. Lockheed is truly alien, and I suspect far more than a simple animal. So Lockheed seems to agree there with his folded hands. Yeah, I've a feeling that of us all, only Kitty has a hope of truly understanding him. And therein lies part of the answer to Colossus's question. The dragon's poor thing was an unrequited love. So that's interesting. And is it Colossus who says that doesn't explain why she suddenly turned violent and tore Tokyo apart? Oh no, it's Nightcrawler. So Wolverine says here, love makes you crazy, Elf. You should know that. You find yourself thinking about settling down, raising a family, building a house, or a nest. So this is up here on Mount Fuji, right behind Tokyo. The nest that the female dragon was building from the tops of those skyscrapers. Really interesting. And Wolverine, recently jilted at the altar by Mariko, says it's a nice dream when it works. So that's a fairly resonant line from Wolverine, given what's happened to him in recent months, continuity-wise, in the comic. And then we have an epilogue. Very interesting, this. Washington, D.C., Senator Kelly. This bill is an obscenity. So here we have... this, I guess he's a senator too, Philip, and Kelly is making the point here. It takes sophisticated technology and expertise to build a nuclear bomb, none at all to create a mutant. I can name a half dozen already extant, with power sufficient to ravage the world. Who can say how many others exist that we don't know about? We have to be able as a nation and perhaps a species to defend ourselves. But this guy is taking a different perspective. He says, granted, but what you propose will only make matters worse. Robert, it isn't that far removed from legalized slavery. I respect you as a colleague and friend, but I won't support you on this. Indeed, I'll do everything possible to stop you. So they're at disagreement on this, whatever it is that Kelly's brought to his friend and colleague. And then we see what it is here. The Mutant Affairs Control Act, introduced this day, 23rd of January 1984, in the second session of the 98th Congress by Senator Robert Kelly. And this is intriguing because in Days of Future Past, the Mutant Control Act was passed in 1984 by Robert Kelly, by Senator Robert Kelly. So the X-Men, back in that storyline, felt by saving Robert Kelly from assassination, it wasn't introduced by him, but rather by saving Senator Kelly from assassination, that the future, the dystopian future of 2013 and the genocide of mutants and the death of all the superheroes practically wouldn't come about. So they managed to save Robert Kelly from assassination, and the irony now is a Mutant Control Act is being brought to the Senate as a bill by that very guy that they saved. And of course it raises the question as to whether that dystopian future lies in the X-Men's future again. And here we have the Washington Post or underneath with the story from Japan, mutants battle dragon over Tokyo. So very done in one type issue. And let me know what you think about it in the comments to the video. Wolverine here doing the honors of answering the letters which have to do with Uncanny X-Men 172 and 173, which was set in Japan. It's a nice little drawing of Wolverine there. And there you go. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 181. If you did, please like the video on YouTube. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.